When Elena Martinez signs a contract to marry deaf billionaire Adrian Blackwood, she expects a cold arrangement with a silent stranger. Instead, she discovers a man trapped behind walls of isolation, communicating in a language she doesn't understand. As she secretly learns sign language to bridge their distance, Elena uncovers dangerous secrets about Adrian's accident, his scheming brother, and the empire built on lies. But the biggest revelation comes when she realizes Adrian isn't who she thought he was, and the real Blackwood heir has been hiding in plain sight all along, orchestrating a revenge that will destroy everything she's come to love. This is 15-minute binge watch. One story. One obsession. 15 minutes. Let's begin. Elena Martinez stared at the contract on the mahogany desk, her hands trembling as she held the gold-embossed pen. 24 years old, drowning in her mother's medical debt, and here she was, about to sell herself into marriage like some Victorian heroine. The lawyer cleared his throat impatiently. Across from her sat Adrian Blackwood, the deaf billionaire whose accident 3 years ago had made headlines worldwide. He watched her with dark, unreadable eyes, his hands folded calmly on the table. He was devastatingly handsome in a dangerous way, all sharp angles and controlled power, but his silence felt like a wall she could never scale. She signed. The pen scratched against paper, sealing her fate. The wedding happened within a week, a sterile courthouse affair with no guests except the lawyer and a bored photographer. Adrian barely looked at her during the ceremony. When the officiant pronounced them married, he didn't kiss her. He simply nodded, turned, and walked toward the waiting limousine. Elena followed, feeling like a ghost trailing behind her own life. The Blackwood mansion was a fortress of glass and steel perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Inside, it was all cold marble and empty spaces that echoed with loneliness. A housekeeper named Mrs. Chin showed Elena to her room, a beautiful prison with ocean views and a door that locked from her side. Adrian's room was at the opposite end of the hall. The message was clear: this was a business arrangement, nothing more. The first month was suffocating. Adrian spent his days in his study or the company headquarters, communicating with her through terse written notes left on the kitchen counter. Dinner at 7. Meeting tonight, don't wait up. Your mother's surgery is scheduled for Thursday. He fulfilled his end of the bargain with mechanical precision, but treated her like an employee rather than a wife. Elena wandered the empty halls, ate silent dinners alone, and wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. Then came the night that changed everything. Elena couldn't sleep, haunted by the weight of her choices. She wandered downstairs around 2 in the morning and found the library door ajar, golden light spilling into the hallway. Inside, Adrian stood by the window, his back to her, his shoulders shaking. He was crying. The sight of this powerful, controlled man breaking down in the darkness struck something deep inside her chest. She must have made a sound because he spun around, quickly wiping his face. For a moment, their eyes locked, and she saw something raw and desperate in his gaze. Then his expression shuttered closed again. He grabbed a notepad and scribbled furiously, "Go back to bed." But Elena didn't move. Instead, she did something impulsive. She raised her hands and signed slowly, clumsily, "Are you okay?" She'd learned that phrase from a YouTube video that afternoon, her first secret lesson in American Sign Language. Adrian froze, his eyes widening with shock. Then something flickered across his face, too quick to read. He shook his head and signed back, fast and fluid. She understood nothing except his frustration. He grabbed the notepad again, "Don't pity me." Elena left, but something had shifted inside her. She'd seen behind his mask, and she couldn't unsee it. The next morning, she enrolled in online ASL classes, dedicating hours each day to learning while Adrian was away. Mrs. Chin noticed and smiled knowingly but said nothing. 6 weeks later, Elena could hold basic conversations in sign language. She practiced in front of mirrors, her hands moving through the air like birds learning to fly. She hadn't revealed her new skill to Adrian yet, waiting for the right moment. But what she discovered instead changed everything. It happened on a Thursday evening. Adrian's brother Marcus came to dinner, all charm and expensive cologne. Elena had met him once before at the wedding, where he'd gripped her hand too tightly and let his eyes linger too long. Tonight, Adrian stepped away to take a business call through text relay, leaving Elena alone with Marcus in the dining room. Marcus leaned across the table, his smile predatory. "You know, you could do so much better than my broken brother." Elena's stomach turned. "He's not broken. Isn't he?" Marcus swirled his wine. "Tell me, has he even touched you? Or does he just hide in his silent little world, pretending he's still whole?" "You should leave," Elena said quietly, standing. Marcus laughed. "The thing about Adrian is that he's always been too soft. Too trusting. That's why the accident happened so easily." Elena's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, easily?" Marcus's smile widened, and he opened his mouth to respond, but Adrian appeared in the doorway. His eyes moved between them, sharp and assessing. Marcus stood smoothly, signing something to Adrian with an innocent expression. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Marcus left, pausing to whisper in Elena's ear, "Be careful, little wife. Nothing in this house is what it seems." That night, Elena couldn't stop thinking about Marcus's words. The accident happened so easily. She'd read the news reports when they'd first gotten engaged. Adrian had been driving along the coastal highway when his car went over the cliff. He'd survived but lost his hearing from the head trauma. The official story said he'd swerved to avoid an animal, but Marcus's implication suggested something darker. Elena began investigating, using Adrian's computer when he was away. She found encrypted files, medical records, insurance documents. And then, buried deep in a folder marked "Personal," she found a police report that had never been released to the media. According to the report, Adrian's brake lines had shown signs of tampering. The investigation had been quietly closed after the Blackwood family lawyer intervened. Someone had tried to murder Adrian. Her hands shook as she closed the laptop. She looked up to find Adrian standing in the doorway, watching her. How long had he been there? His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a challenge. Elena made a decision. She raised her hands and signed, her movements careful and clear, "I know about the accident. Someone cut your brake lines." Adrian's entire body went rigid. Then he moved forward like a predator, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides. He grabbed her wrists, not roughly but firmly, his eyes searching her face with desperate intensity. His hands moved in rapid signs. "How long have you known ASL?" 2 months, she signed back. "I've been learning in secret." Something broke open in Adrian's expression. He released her wrists and signed urgently, "You can't trust anyone in this house. Not Marcus, not the staff, not even me. Not even you." Elena's heart hammered. "Why?" Adrian closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, they were full of anguish. His hands moved slowly, deliberately, "Because I'm not Adrian Blackwood." The world tilted sideways. Elena grabbed the desk for support. "What?" The man she'd married sat down heavily in the chair, his hands trembling as he signed. "My name is Julian Reeves. I'm Adrian's best friend. The real Adrian died in that accident. I survived, but I lost my hearing and my face was destroyed. During reconstruction surgery, Marcus convinced me to take Adrian's place. He said the company needed a Blackwood at the helm, that shareholders would panic if they knew the truth. He said it was temporary, just until things stabilized." Elena felt like she was falling. "But 3 years. I know." Julian's signs were heavy with guilt. "By the time I realized what was happening, I was trapped. Marcus controlled everything, the doctors who knew my real identity, the surgery records, the death certificate. If I came forward now, I'd be accused of fraud. The company would collapse. And Marcus would inherit everything." "Why?" Elena signed, her mind racing. "Why would he do this?" "Because Adrian's will left everything to charity if he died without an heir. As long as Adrian is alive, Marcus remains on the board with access to the fortune. But if I'm exposed as a fraud, Everything goes to Marcus as next of kin. He's been bleeding the company dry through shell corporations, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth and take it all. Elena sank into a chair, her thoughts whirling. And me? The marriage. Julian's face twisted with emotion. Marcus insisted. He said it would make the charade more convincing, show that Adrian was moving on with his life. He chose you specifically because your mother's debt made you desperate and controllable. I'm sorry, Elena. I never wanted to drag you into this nightmare. They sat in silence, the weight of revelations crushing down on them. Finally, Elena signed. What was the real Adrian like? Julian's expression softened. He was brilliant, kind, reckless with his money because he wanted to change the world. He trusted everyone, especially Marcus. That's what got him killed. He paused, his hands hesitant. You remind me of him sometimes. The way you see the good in things. There's no good in this, Elena signed back. There's you, Julian signed. His hands lingered in the air, vulnerable. Learning my language in secret. Trying to reach me when you thought I was someone else. That's more than good. That's extraordinary. Elena's breath caught. Over the past 2 months, she'd been falling for the silent men who left her coffee exactly how she liked it, who donated anonymously to causes her mother cared about, who played piano in the music room at midnight when he thought no one was listening. But that man was built on lies. I don't even know who you are, she signed. Then let me show you. Julian stood, offering his hand. No more secrets. No more walls. Against her better judgment, Elena took his hand. He led her through the mansion to a locked room she'd never been allowed to enter. Inside was a studio filled with paintings, dozens of them, all landscapes of the same cliff where the accident happened. But they weren't dark or morbid. They were beautiful, full of light and hope, as if the artist was trying to reclaim something precious from a place of trauma. Adrian loved to paint, Julian signed. I picked it up after the accident, trying to keep his memory alive. But somewhere along the way, it became mine too. My way of processing what happened. Elena walked among the paintings, seeing the progression from dark to light, from despair to hope. These are extraordinary. They're honest, Julian signed. That's all I want to be now. Honest. With you. Over the next weeks, Julian told Elena everything. How he and Adrian had been friends since college, built the company together, how the accident had happened on Julian's birthday when they were both heading to a celebration. How he'd woken up in the hospital unable to hear, his face wrapped in bandages, and Marcus whispering in his ear about the opportunity they had. How guilt and trauma had made him agree to something unthinkable. Elena listened and began to understand the men behind the deception. Julian was nothing like she'd imagined. He was funny, signing jokes that made her laugh until her sides hurt. He was passionate about marine conservation, the real reason the company had shifted to sustainable technologies. He was tender, teaching her the subtle nuances of ASL that textbooks couldn't capture. And he was falling in love with her as desperately as she was falling for him. But Marcus was watching. Elena noticed him appearing more frequently, his questions about her relationship with Adrian becoming pointed. He started bringing lawyers to the house, talking about updating the will now that Adrian was married. Julian became increasingly paranoid, checking the security systems obsessively, hiring a private investigator to document Marcus's embezzlement. The confrontation came on a stormy Friday night. Elena and Julian were in the library when Marcus burst in, drunk and furious. You think I don't know, he shouted, advancing on them. You think I don't see the way you look at each other? You're supposed to be broken, Adrian. Pathetic and isolated. But she fixed you, didn't she? Julian stood, putting himself between Marcus and Elena. His hands moved in sharp, angry signs that Marcus couldn't understand. Still hiding behind your silence, Marcus sneered. Tell me, does she know that you killed Adrian? That you were driving that night? Elena's world stopped. She looked at Julian, saw the truth written in his stricken expression. That's right, Marcus continued, his voice venomous. Adrian wanted to drive because Julian had been drinking at the party. But Julian insisted, said he was fine. He swerved off the road, drunk and stupid, and Adrian died because of it. When I found them, I saw an opportunity. Keep the golden boy alive, let the nobody take his place and his guilt. Julian's hands trembled as he signed to Elena, it's true. I killed my best friend. The brake lines were cut, but I was still drunk. I should have insisted he drive. It's my fault he's dead. Elena felt everything crashing down around her. The men she'd fallen in love with, the marriage built on lies, the brother who was a monster, the truth that destroyed everything. But then she looked at Julian, really looked at him. She saw the guilt he carried like stones in his pockets, the way he tried to honor Adrian's memory by living his dreams, the genuine love in his eyes when he looked at her. And she made a choice. She turned to Marcus and spoke, her voice steady. You cut those brake lines. Marcus's smile faltered. You can't prove that. Actually, Elena said, pulling out her phone, I can. You see, while you were so busy watching us, I've been investigating you. I found the mechanic you paid off. I found the shell companies. I found everything. And I've already sent it to the FBI. The color drained from Marcus's face. You're blowing. I'm deadly serious, Elena said. The only question now is whether you leave quietly or in handcuffs. Choose wisely. Marcus looked between them, calculating. Then he lunged, not at Julian, but at Elena. Everything happened in a blur. Julian moved with devastating speed, years of martial arts training taking over. There was a struggle, a crash, and then Marcus was on the ground, unconscious, and Julian was pulling Elena into his arms, his whole body shaking. The police came. Marcus was arrested, his crimes finally exposed. The truth about the accident and Julian's identity came out, splashed across every news outlet. The company's board voted to keep Julian as CEO, recognizing that he'd built the success of the last 3 years. Adrian's charity was honored as he'd wished, funded by profits Julian had carefully preserved despite Marcus's embezzlement. But Elena and Julian's marriage was annulled, the contract void since it had been based on fraud. They stood in the empty mansion 3 months later, legally strangers, emotionally tangled beyond separation. Julian signed, "You're free now. Free from the debt, free from this lie, free from me." Elena smiled and signed back, her movements confident now, fluent, "I don't want freedom from you. I want freedom with you." Elena. Julian's hands hesitated. "I'm not who you married." "No," she agreed. "You're better. You're real. You're the man who learned to paint light in darkness. Who honored his friend's memory by becoming something good. Who fell in love with a woman who learned sign language in secret." She stepped closer. "I don't want Adrian Blackwood, the illusion. I want Julian Reeves, the truth." Julian's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," Elena signed with a teasing smile. "But you're stuck with me anyway." This time, when he kissed her, it was honest. No contracts, no deceptions, no walls. Just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of lies and chosen truth instead. They remarried 6 months later, a real wedding with friends and family, with Elena's recovered mother crying in the front row. Julian signed his vows, his hand speaking the language of his heart, and Elena signed back in the language she'd learned for love. The mansion became a home filled with laughter and art and the beautiful silence of two people who understood each other perfectly. Elena went back to school for marine biology, working alongside Julian on conservation projects. They adopted a deaf daughter 2 years later, teaching her that different doesn't mean broken, that silence can speak volumes, and that sometimes the greatest love stories are written not with words but with hands. And every year on the anniversary of the accident, they visited the cliff where everything had changed. Julian painted, Elena stood beside him, and together they honored the men whose tragedy had brought them together, whose memory lived on in every good thing they created from the ashes of loss. Because the real twist wasn't that Julian had been pretending to be Adrian. It was that in trying to become someone else, he'd finally discovered who he truly was. And Elena, in learning to speak his language, had learned to hear her own heart. In the end, their arranged marriage hadn't been hell at all. It had been the beginning of something neither of them expected, a love built on truth, spoken in silence, and louder than any words could ever be. Some loves save you. Others own you. If you crave dangerous billionaires and twisted romance, subscribe to 15-Minute Binge Watch. The next story starts soon. Don't miss it.